Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico Borrego.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound. The podcast is being recorded in the Stone Age. Now, there's a lot of new music being released this summer, this year in particular. And one of the bands releasing a new album later this month is the band Queen of the Stone Age. And they're a band we've kind of talked about a couple of times before on the podcast. And they released a new song last month called Emotional Sickness. Or Emotion Sickness.
I think just Emotion.
Emotion Sickness. And Tony and I were talking about it. We're texting each other about it because that's what we do. And Tony, you had a great idea for a podcast episode. Why don't you tell everyone your idea for this episode today?
So, in spirit of the new album coming out, I thought it'd be good if I listened to the last Queens of the Stone Age record, one that I didn't really get into, and for Rico to listen to the first Queens of the Stone Age record, one that he didn't really get into. And it's going to be kind of just a second listen, a fresh listen, and just kind of rediscover what we like about the band as well. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so it's going to be maybe a future series that we'll come back to, kind of a revisiting series where we revisit an album that maybe when it came out we didn't appreciate or enjoy, and maybe after so many years we want to go back and give it another try. So like Tony said, for me that's their first album. I got into the band after they released their album Like Clockwork, and I had heard of their songs beforehand, but that was the album I listened to where I'm like, okay, this is the band that I really want to check out because I really like this album. I love these songs. So then I went through their back catalog, and they were kind of a band where it's like none of their other albums really hit me as hard as Like Clockwork. I tend to like their more mature sound and more of their catchy songs from their albums, which tend to be like the singles, like Little Sister, Go With The Flow, No One Knows. And then Tony, when you got into them, you kind of were like the opposite of me, weren't you?
A little bit. It's not that I disliked the mature songs, because I definitely did like them, but I liked the songs that were like rock, Like I thought, oh, this is a cool rock band. And I think why that's important to me is because I guess a lot of the rock that I grew up listening to was more like classic rock or like 90s grunge. So it was like cool to have a band that's more modern, but they have all like the rock principles that I enjoy.
Yeah, so you tended just to like probably a bit more of their catalog than I did, and maybe even still do. But it was kind of fun because we were kind of liking different things from the same band. And that still probably seems to be the case today. So I'm revisiting the first album because out of all their albums, that's the one that I just would never go back to. I just never found any standout songs. And then we'll talk about that first. And then Tony, he'll talk about him going back to the last Queens of the Stone Age release, at least technically, as of today, their most recent album. But in a couple weeks, that won't be the case. But he'll talk about revisiting Villains. But so I went back and listened to their self-titled album that came out 1998. I mean, at that point it was just a Josh Homme, lead singer and guitarist, and then his former bandmate from, how do you say it, Caius, is that how you say?
Yeah
Caius.
I don't know how to say the guy's name though in it.
Yeah, well, Alfredo Hernandez was their drummer, and was he their drummer? I'm sorry, I don't know much about Kairos. I'll just say that up front. But they're a stoner desert rock band that Josh Homme was a part of, and then he ended up leaving and forming Queens of the Stone Age. But on the first album, it was just the two of them. So I think Josh did actually most of like the bass and all the guitars on the album. And it has definitely like a more simple approach to songwriting than what they would later end up doing, because they, as the band kind of progressed through each album, new band members would be included. They're a band where it's like every album had like a different lineup, which is why they're most like their last three albums, I believe, is going to be like the same lineup, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, their first album, when I went back and when I remember first listening to it, when I was going through all their albums, to me, it just lacked something special. Like, I'll say right up here, right up front, Queens of the Stone Age fans are going to hate me for saying this, but um, their biggest album, Songs for the Deaf, is probably the one that most fans will say that is their best, their favorite, their crowning achievement. I don't think so. In fact, it's it might be like my second least favorite or third least favorite from them. Like, and I know I'm gonna get stoned. You know, people are gonna throw stones at me for saying this, but I just don't find as much enjoyment from it than most people, like Tony. But I will say even that album I enjoyed more because there were some like standout songs. Where the first one there wasn't on my first listen a long time ago, but revisiting it, you know, over this last week, I do think I was too harsh on it. I do think, but here's my problem. I think the album, and you can tell me what you think about this, Tony. I think the album would have been a strong EP if they were to cut some songs, because some bands come out with an EP first. I think this would have been a strong EP, debut EP.
Okay. Yeah, I will say this. I think I think you could get a really strong or a fairly strong album if you cut some songs and swap some out for the few bonus tracks that are on the reissue version. But if taking only the original track listing, I guess you really could cut it down to an EP. I think it'd be more like maybe like 7 songs, but
yeah, I did not listen to the bonus songs. I should have, but I did not, because I just wanted to compare the original release than
right, the meat and potatoes.
Release. And I will say this. I will say that like the album starts off really strong with the first 3. Like after the first 3, I was kind of like, yeah, I definitely gave this album too much hate. Like Regular John, the album opener, it's not like mind blowing. Even like comparing songs from Rated R, their next album, I think Rated R actually is better than Songs for the Deaf. I think some of the standout songs on there are like fantastic. But like Regular John, the album opener for this album, it's decent. I like the tempo of the song.
It's kind of more like a Caius type thing, I think. I don't know that much Caius, but it's definitely more of that.
And I know like Zero
Kairos.
Desert. Yeah, I know like Zero Kairos. And the only reason I'm not gone and listen to Caius, the only reason I have not gone back and listened to them is because I figured if this is the album that sounds most like them, and this happens to be like one of my least favorite Queens of the Stone Age album, I just probably not going to prefer it. Because again, I much prefer Queens of the Stone Age like more like normal rock sound or mature sound. I just don't like the desert or stoner rock as much. But that said, like Regular John album opener is a decent song. The guitar effects that kind of sound like reverse guitars. I don't know if that's like a pedal.
I think it's just like the volume swells, I think.
Yeah, like that. I think that's pretty cool. Avon, the next song on the album, it's like kind of got a heavier riff, and I think probably more of that like stoner rock sound. And it's kind of boring at first, but when the drums kind of kick in and the song kind of like progresses, I felt like I was enjoying it more.
I actually like the vocals on that one.
Yeah, I think the vocals were more interesting than on Regular John.
And can I go ahead and make a statement kind of on this album?
Yeah.
So for me, the thing with this album is, especially just looking at the first 3 songs, there's potential for them to be great songs. But, it's his first album. It's mostly just him and Alfredo. And they're just a little underdeveloped. I feel like if they maybe had the same treatment as the next albums, they could be very memorable songs. Additionally, though, I could see like speaking of If Only, like kind of the way that riff goes, it's almost kind of like a 3s and a 7s to me almost. I'm not sure if that's outlandish to say, but
Well,
Once again, too, I think a big thing is the vocals are much lacking compared to the other albums. So I think that does make a huge difference.
no, yeah, for If Only, I did think that one had like the most radio friendly sound to it. And not like radio friendly, like, like I guess like on a rock radio station, but like it was like the song where I felt like it could have been like a single. The chorus it was very hooky with like the vocals. That one had solos on it, which I think I was wanting more from this album, because like if the album's more simple with it's like progressions and the songwriting, I wish it actually had more like solos. But since it's like his first album, kind of by himself, kind of starting this new band, I'm like, I understand why there isn't more like crazy guitar work. I will say on Avon, like I really do like the drumming. Like there's like the little drum solo part near the end that I think is fantastic. And
Hmm.
Queens is they've always had good drummers, because like Dave Grohl drummed on Songs for the Deaf, and he obviously Dave Grohl is an all time best drummer. Um, and I think on Avon the drumming is fantastic.
You know what the best drumming is on the album for me?
What's that?
Definitely Give the Mule What He Wants. That
So
song has epic drums. And that's actually the song they play that one, I forget what the interviewer is, but that guy who interviews, guitarist, when they're doing the one in Josh Homme's place, like they're jamming over that riff from Give the Mule What He Wants.
I think I know what you're talking about. That video.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that song is one of the more interesting ones on the album, because it's very like bass heavy. Like it starts off with, right? Is that a bass riff, or is it like a really
Yeah.
low? Yeah,
Yeah, it's a fat bass.
but it sounds almost like happy. Like the notes that he plays, like I don't know, like once the guitars kick in, it sounds more like a standard song for this album, standard Queen song. But like I don't know, it was the bass line coming in first by itself was very interesting. Um, and I did think the instrumentation throughout that song was good. It was like a tight song, especially near the end. Like the way the drums came together with the bass and the guitar for like some of those more like heavier parts of the song near the end. I thought it was like very tight playing. Like so I did like that song. Um, there were some songs that like I still really couldn't connect to. Um, Walking on the Sidewalks, I didn't really love the riff.
Oh,
I felt it was a little too stiff.
oh.
I didn't really like that it was a little bit slower in the tempo. I thought it was way too long. You Would Know is maybe like my least favorite on the album, just like composition
Way too
wise.
repetitive. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's
Too
I,
monotone.
the riff is super annoying. I hated the riff. It just was not pleasing to my ears. And then like, well, obviously the one instrumental song on the album, Hispanic Impressions, I just thought was like not needed. Like I get it was supposed to be kind of like a fun little break song on the album, but I thought that went on too long, even though it's not that long of a song. There's like a moment where like it stops and you think it's over, and then it starts again, and I was like, no, why couldn't it just be over?
Kind of a
This,
big FU in there. May I throw some food for thought here with it?
yeah.
So this song has like the feel of it is quite similar to a Jimi Hendrix song from the Are You Experienced record called Manic Depression. Hispanic Impressions? Kind of a
Okay.
similar title.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know, and I've heard that Jimi Hendrix album before, but it's been like a long time since I have.
But I'll say this though, this album would have been better if they just put Manic Depression on here instead of that.
Yeah, it was just I found the guitar soloing to be a little annoying too. Like,
The other bonus track instrumental, the Droid one, that one's definitely I would have swapped.
but there were still some other songs I liked. I liked "You Can't Quit Me, Baby" because it had like a really like slower groove, but it worked. It was like it was a slow groove that was actually grooving, unlike like Walking on the Sidewalks. I like that it was like bass heavy. I will say I hated the lead guitar part though. Like if this song would have been one of like my top three in the album without that little lead guitar part. That part I hated. Yeah.
That thing, yeah.
That
It,
like it like I don't why put that on the song? Like it makes, And I'm sure there's people out there. I'll probably get hate for it on the Queens of the Stone Age subreddit, like who are like, no, that's the best part of the song. Like, no, I hate it. It worsened the song for me.
When I was when I was younger and a little angstier, I did like that lead. But now I listen back and I'm like, you know what? They could have done something different. But I know that song they've done live. You know, like I think it's actually on. Is it the Rated R Deluxe thing? It might be on there. And speaking of live as well, Walking on the Sidewalks, there's a live version where Mark Lanigan sings it, and I think that version's definitely better. I think Mark's just fitted. He kind of makes the song rock out harder.
Yeah,
So
I do think this album, like really quick talking about it, like as a whole experience instead of just the songs. I do think with a lot of debut albums, I tend to think most bands get better, and this is one of the bands that obviously they get better. I mean, like I said, even though Songs for the Deaf isn't like actually in my top three from them, I do think that's like way better than this album. I think Rated R like is a huge step up. And sometimes a sophomore album is hard for bands, but I tend not to like debut albums all that much. Like Pearl Jam 10, not my top three Pearl Jam albums, even though for most people it would be. Like Hot Fuss the Killers, I much prefer Sam's Town. So I tend not to enjoy a debut album from a band as much, and this is one of those cases. But like, there's promise that is shown on this album.
right, I think
Like,
that's the important part.
yeah, because like I don't love a lot of the guitar tones. I think they all kind of start sounding the same near the end. I didn't think there was enough variety or dynamics in some of the songs, or just the way like all the songs played off one another. But like I do think, production was pretty decent, especially like for that time. I do think like the album is cohesive, so like it sounds like one project. I just don't think the lyrics are as clever as he gets to be on future albums. I don't think his vocal melody, when it comes to him writing melodies, I think he gets way better as albums go on. So it was a sign of good things to come, but it also was a sign of annoying things to come when it comes to the way they add things to their songs that I hate. Because, like we said, that little lead part on "You Can't
Quit Me,
You Can't
Baby.
Quit Me, Baby," yeah, that one. That's something like they would do on like other songs in the future that I don't like. The way they end that song in particular, where it gets faster, 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 that part was cool. But then when there's like 30 seconds of like weird, like sound effects and like
Kind of like a trash can ending, but not
yeah,
really.
it was a trash. I hated the ending on that song, and I get like it's not
It's chaotic.
supposed to be taken seriously and stuff, but like I had to, like, the second time I heard it, I just kind of skipped that outro like after it started to slow down, because I was like, no. And then same for the ending song.
Oh god.
I Was a Teenage Hand Model. I like a lot about that song. The low piano notes was interesting, and I tend to really love Queens of the Stone Age songs where they use keyboards or pianos.
And best vocal
Uh,
melody on the album.
yeah, it had really cool melodies that were kind of almost like quirky with the way they're going high, and there was like even I think a little bit of like harmonies from Josh. But and the fact that it had really no drums other than like shakers was cool. But then like the little farty Star Wars sound effects, I hated. Like the little laser sounds, I hated that. Like,
Yeah, I just skipped the song, honestly.
yeah,
I kind of like it, but like I'd rather just hear it in my head without the sound effects.
and it's, to me, it's exactly like what they would do on their next album. The closing song on Rated R, I think I Lost My Headache, where it just ends with those annoying horns. I'm like, why do they do that? Like they, especially I Was a Teenage Hand Model. Like that's a song that I would actually really enjoy if they took out that whole sound effects things that they added to it. So,
And I'll say this, both those songs, they both do have something cool about it that makes me really wish I could listen to it. So I Was a Teenage Hand Model. After the song ends, there's like a phone recording of Nick Oliveri basically accepting Josh's offer to play bass on the next record. So that's actually really cool to hear. But too bad the whole song is covered in those sound effects. And then I think I Lost My Headache. I actually think the song part of it is decent. Not my favorite song on the record, but I do like the song. But it's like 3 minutes of annoying horns, and it's just like I think I read in an interview he was saying, "Oh yeah, like putting something weird for those people that are, still listening, or to wake them up if they fell asleep, or I don't know, probably something he said like that, maybe not." But either way, I don't like it. It's annoying, unnecessary. I think even the record after Songs for the Deaf, I think that has a better ending where it's is it just Mosquito Song, which is almost kind of like a bonus track.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the last one.
So, I
Yeah,
don't know.
so overall, did I rate this album too low? Yes. Like this album is not trash by any means. Um it is just I think far from their best material. Um I probably still would put it as my least favorite of theirs, only because I think every other album after this has more standout songs. Even like I said, Songs for the Deaf, there's a good portion of it that I don't love. Like the production is better, the sound quality like is like just their tones are better. I think the playing is better. Obviously you have Dave Grohl on drums.
And
I
there's
think Josh gets better.
so many details in those songs, and that's what makes it special.
Yeah,
I will
but
say though,
oh yeah,
I'm not sure if this is how you feel about this. I think my favorite production the band has done is Rated R, which that kind of sucks because that's the only album that has production even close to that. Like it's unique in its production compared to the rest of their discography. But I like it though a lot.
I mean I'm still a like Clockwork guy.
But
um
just production, just production.
I mean I do think the production on Rated R is really good. Like I said, I like Rated R way more than Songs for the Deaf. Like to me there's only like two songs on the album I don't love, which is the last song, which we already talked about. I think I lost my headache, and then one of the Nick songs I don't love as well. Or no, two of the Nick songs. Yeah, Nick was not
Two?
my favorite. Yeah, because Tension Head
Yeah, Attention Head,
and
and that's actually like I think that's from an I think Nick's old band or something like that.
then Quick into the Pointless.
Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot about Tension Head. I do really
Yeah.
like that one though. I was thinking you were talking about Autopilot,
No, Autopilot, that's the one Nick song that I can listen to and enjoy. Like that one has decent melodies.
and Josh's guitar part's awesome.
Yeah. Um, but like I said, I will say I enjoyed this. I enjoyed their self-titled more than I realized. I probably will buy it on vinyl. That one and Lullabies are the only ones I haven't bought yet on vinyl, and that's mostly because I didn't really enjoy this album enough up until this last week to buy it on vinyl. And then Lullabies, I actually really enjoy. Lullabies is just it's always expensive. That's the only reason that's like the last one for me to buy. But I still prefer Villains over this album, which I know on like the Quincy Solani subreddit, that's like I should be punished for that. That's like a crime. But I enjoy Villains more because I just find Villains to be more of a fun record. And some people will probably think the opposite. They'll think, oh, Subtitle is just a fun album because it's just like desert stoner rock. It's just, but I don't always listen to an album for like a mood. I listen to an album because I really want to get, like deep inside a song. And I feel like there's not really many songs on the self-title that I can like fully immerse myself into. Villains, there's a lot of songs on Villains that I can fully enjoy. So I'm curious,
That
going
that
back and
is
listening,
so interesting.
what do you think of Villains? Going back and listening to it this last week, they're as of today, their most recent album, but I mean only for like another couple weeks.
Okay, so that's actually funny because your statement you just said is how I feel about Villains. I actually much more enjoyed Villains this time around listening to it because I didn't listen to it for the song. I'm not saying the songs aren't meaningful or aren't deep. I don't mean anything like that. But I listened to it more with just, oh, this is a fun rock album. And I listened to it and I feel like I understood the album a lot better. And I'm not saying that their first self-titled record is a meaningful record or anything either, but a lot of these songs are more kind of like party vibes on Villains, kind of like how like Nine Inch Nails is the heavy riffs, but with like kind of like the party drums. And yeah, I mean, I like the album now. The album cover too. I've never seen the movie, but it reminds me of Pan's Labyrinth. There's this scary dude in it, and his like eyes are on his hands. So that's also kind of funny.
But
But
okay, so is Villain still your least favorite though?
um, I would say so, but I do think it's probably. I mean, it is a better album than self-titled. I don't think I don't think anyone can really argue that in terms of
Oh
quality.
no, there will be some people that do.
But do I enjoy self-titled more? Yes, just because I have more of a connection to it. I've listened to it a long time, and it's always kind of there's always something kind of endearing about bands' debut releases. But
Well,
I will say though, there was a couple songs on Villains that I actually really liked, and there's one song in particular I wanted to point out.
yeah,
And
so yeah. Name your favorites. What were your favorites on the album?
my favorite, I'm not sure if it's gonna shock you, Rico. Maybe I'm hyping it for nothing, but Fortress is my favorite.
You know what? I fucking love Fortress. Um, and it is funny because so I only recently joined the Queens of the Stone Age subreddit when they released their latest single. And the only reason I hadn't joined that subreddit before is because I felt like I have very unpopular opinions when it comes to this band, and I sometimes feel left out of the community because it's like I know if I write, if I comment on something and give my opinion, it's just going to get downvoted, which is kind of how subreddit is. You have to kind of be tough about it, and but
You just don't want to get flamed.
yeah, because I definitely don't. I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not the consensus when it comes to like Queens of the Stone Age most popular opinions, but Fortress is a lot of people's least favorite from the album.
What?
Yeah, like they don't like that song
Why?
because they just think like specifically they think lyrically it is not like the way Josh normally writes because it is way more like emotional and straight to the point. There's no really like clever lyrical like metaphors or wordplay. He does a lot of wordplay. I feel like when it comes to his lyrics, and there's not a lot of that on Fortress, or really a lot of this album, but especially
Wait,
Fortress.
are you kidding me right now?
No, I'm not joking. I mean, maybe I'm
What's
wrong.
this? What's the song where he literally says Xanadu's and Xanadon'ts? And then another one he starts speaking like French or something. There's a lot. And like the first two songs, he's like talking first two songs in a row, he talks about being 17. Like I feel like the lyrics are pretty
But okay,
quirky, and
but
that's
on
actually why I didn't like
Fortress,
some of them as much.
no, but on Fortress specifically, like because Fortress, I remember an interview. He said it was about his children, and the song specifically is like a message to his children about how like you're gonna have terrible moments in your life, but like know that I'm always there for you, which is like super like sweet. And I'm like, that's a great message, for like a father to write to his children. So
Wholesome.
I, it's just, yeah, he doesn't really sugarcoat it. Like he doesn't hide it in the wit that he normally does. But I love Fortress. I especially love the melodies, and I love like the little synth part. I love that, and I'm thinking
I
that's
think
another
that
thing
was the
people don't like.
best use of synth on the album because there's like synth somewhere else. I couldn't tell you exactly where, but like I feel like even though it wasn't necessarily subtle on this song, I think it just really complemented the song. I know it was just kind of going with the vocal melody. And you know what? I wonder if you think this too. I'm gonna run this by you. Fortress kind of reminds me of another Queen song. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Not off the top of my head.
From Era. And oddly, it's
Oh,
also the fourth song on the record.
oh no, then I don't know because I was
I
gonna I was gonna say suture, but
No, it kind of reminds me of Into the Hollow. Like in the
like
chorus, Into the Hollow, he really sings kind of those notes going up, kind of building. That's what the chorus of Fortress kind of reminds me.
I could see that a little bit. Yeah.
Even kind of the pacing. Into the Hollow. Like it reminds me of that.
Well, then that makes sense why you like it because I do know you love Era.
I do like Era. I do.
No, I'm really glad you like Fortress because I think that's a great that when I first heard the album, that was one of my favorites besides the singles that had been released. And I spun the record actually just yesterday in prep for this episode, and I was like, yeah, Fortress is like it's just a solid song. Like the synth is so great. Um, it's it is actually one of the kind of longer songs on the album. Like it's almost 5.5 minutes, but it feels like well developed. And
I mean, honestly, there's three songs that are 6 to 6.5 minutes, and there's like three other ones that are 5.5 minutes.
yeah, there's
So
only one song that's under 4 minutes.
that's crazy. Head Like a
Uh,
Haunted House, and I actually like that one.
yeah, Head Out. That's not one of my favorites. I think it's fun like on our first couple listens, but and maybe it's like fun like on a Halloween playlist. But that's like one where he's like, um, Josh Homme has the nickname Ginger Elvis.
Yeah.
And like this feels like he's doing like a rockabilly kind of style, but like with harder instrumentation. It sounds like he's doing like an Elvis impersonation, you know.
Yeah, and
Not my
that's
favorite.
something I don't love that he does. And I remember I specifically don't like the way he sings domesticated animals. Which I know it's
Oh,
cool because like
really?
the riffs in Seven, but he just sounds like too silly.
Like during the part where he's like the where he's mimicking the guitar riff,
You
like
get
the
back
oh, see,
up.
I love that part.
I don't know. It felt a little too tongue in cheek for me.
I will say, talking about his vocals on this album, I do think there are times where I wish he went less into the falsetto.
I feel like he's finally at the point where his vocals are only going to get worse as time goes on. And let me just clarify, I don't think the vocals are bad on this album. I think they're still really good. But I think I do have to remind myself is that his vocals aren't going to get any better for me.
Yeah, and
Um,
I just falsetto can kind of go like a little can go a long way for me. So I do think like okay, like on domesticated animals when he's like singing the kind of higher falsetto part, like tell me where the gold is, where like the music changes to like I don't know if you want to call it a bridge or a post chorus, like that part can get a little bit annoying after a while. But I
mhm.
just that's one of my that's a song musically where it reminds me of like older albums. Like that song is not like if people don't like that song, I'd be a little surprised
Okay,
musically.
here's what I don't understand is that that's a song that you would not like. That's a song where if it was on an older record of theirs, you'd be like, yeah, it's forgettable. Yeah, I don't like
No,
it.
because I find that riff catchy. Dun 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 dun. Like I find that catchy. Their songs. I mean, I will say, over the years, the more I listen to their music, the songs that I didn't like as much, I have started to kind of started to like more because I do. Sometimes the song isn't catchy on first listen. Sometimes you have to listen to it multiple times to find that thing that keeps you or that makes you want to keep coming back to it. But like that song right away, like on first listen, I enjoyed that song because it was very catchy to me. And that's why I
Now,
feel like a lot of these songs now are catchy, but like some like Unreborn Again, that one took a long time for me to get into because that one is like it's almost like 7 minutes. I think it's the longest on
it
the
is.
album, and that one has so many parts, and that is sometimes this band's downfall is they write too many parts or like too many bridges. But like that song took forever to like grow on me because there was just too much.
Yeah, I'm not into that one yet. I do like that the intro. It kind of reminds me of Brendan Bence's Tiny Spark, where kind of like the keys doing the synth thing. Um, but that I don't know. Like even though I know like Head Like a Haunted House is a little more of a filler type track, you could say in comparison. I don't know. It was easier to get into. It was more enjoyable. I think that's my thing with this album is so like I like the way it starts and like I don't even mind the way you used to do. It's definitely probably the most like commercial song, but it's
And
it's still catchy. It's fun. But it's when you get to Unreborn Again and Hideaway, like that's where it starts to the album kind of slows for me.
I will agree. I think even though I like both songs now, on first listen, that was like kind of the low point of the album because like Hideaway is actually kind of more of a lighter song, and that it doesn't to me have like a ton of parts to it, and it is kind of actually catchy, but it feels less important than the rest of the songs. It feels like the most like an album track.
That's a good way to put it, honestly. Um, and speaking of album tracks, the first song, I don't think the intro needs to be that long.
Yes, I agree. I don't. I think I would go back to that song more on its own if it didn't have such a long intro.
Right, because like you could shave off a whole minute and you'll still have enough intro to suffice.
Yeah, and I don't mind like instrumental intros. Did I say that right? Instrumental intros. Yeah, it just sounds weird.
Yeah.
Or like long intros if there's like music, but there's a lot of like non-music to that intro.
And then it's like awkwardly quiet, so you would have to like turn up the volume, but then like turn it back down to get to the point. I know the whole point is it's supposed to be a shocker, but like if it's that long, come on.
But talking about that first song, "Feet Don't Fail Me Now," that's a song that I think they played live a lot on the tour, and that was one that a lot of people thought was like one of the best. I do like it. That one has a good like kind of in because okay, this we haven't even talked about production yet. Villains was produced by Mark Ronson.
Oh, so he didn't produce it himself.
You mean Josh Homme?
Yeah.
No, I think he. I mean, on Wikipedia, it doesn't even. It just says producer is just Mark Ronson. I'm
I mean, I'm
sure.
sure he's
I'm
got
sure
some
Josh,
say.
like, yeah, helped him in a lot of it. But yeah, like Mark Ronson, the first time he's ever like just produced a Queens of the Stone Age album. And Mark Ronson, if people who don't know, he's like known for producing more like kind of popular acts like Lady Gaga. He did Amy Winehouse's really big album, Back to Black. But then he also did like Miley Cyrus, and he was known for doing producing Uptown Funk, the Bruno Mars song.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't necessarily hate those songs. I would never listen to Uptown Funk on its own, but like Amy Winehouse, that album is really good. And like the songs he produced on that album are really good. But it's just not someone that you could imagine producing Queens of the Stone Age. And I don't hate it as much as most people. Most people hate the production. They hate it because it shows a poppier side to the band that they just like don't like. They pretend that the band doesn't have those qualities, which is false because like Queens of the Stone Age on every album they have a couple songs on every album that is like single material. Like even Era, like Threes and the Sevens, super catchy.
And it's a great song, honestly.
It's actually not my favorite out of their singles are on that album even, but like yeah, I mean like it's a good song, you know. Songs for the Deaf, like No One Knows, and Go with the Flow, Little Sister on Lullabies, you know, like Rated R, Lost Art of Keeping a Secret. Like they've always had like catchy songs. It's just this album, it's like they're trying to do a whole album of kind of catchy songs, and they leave a little bit of like the weirdness behind. But after like Clockwork, an album where it's about Josh's near death experience and about him talking about life and immortality, they needed like a bounce back kind of fun record. And I feel like Villains is a great bounce back fun record. Like Feet Don't Fail Me Now, the opening song is the perfect balance between like that desert rock sound and a kind of a poppier, dancier, funky sound.
See, I think Feed on Filming Now is like, I really like that one. It feels kind of like a better version of Domesticated Animals to me.
But people hated the first single. Well, I think at the time of the release, I don't remember people hating it, but nowadays on the subreddit for Queens of the Stone Age, people hate the way you used to do. I loved that song when it came out. Lindsay and I would listen to it all the time in the car. Like that's just like a fun song. Like I get it. It's not representative of the band's work and it's kind of a low stakes song. Like there's not a lot to it, but it's just a fun song.
Wait, I have something to say about it, but I gotta interrupt this. Wikipedia says that Queens of the Stone Age was formed in Seattle, Washington. Why does that not sound accurate? Well, we can fact check that later. But
Yeah, I don't. I mean, maybe that's like a technicality.
maybe.
I think most people would assume like it was more like Cayuse, where it's like in the desert of California. I don't know, but
But anyways, the way it used to do, I didn't like it really at first. It just didn't grab my attention. It is catchy and stuff, and I think you really are right about that. Queens does always seem to have some songs that are a little more on the pop side, a little more digestible, um, and especially like production wise too. I don't think Villains has bad production. It's definitely kind of muted a little bit for me. Like it could be a little more dynamic, but it you can see the progression from Like Clockwork to Villains as far as production. And didn't like Josh Homme like produce an Arctic Monkeys record or something like that too?
yeah,
Like I like he's surrounded with enough kind of like, maybe like I don't know if you want to say pop, but like I think he's surrounded enough with like modern sounding things that it's I don't think it's like a bad choice that he went with that for his own record, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel out of place. I guess that's what I'm going for.
I agree. I'm very curious. What did you think of my favorite song on the album, which is "The Evil Has Landed"?
I like it. It okay. It's a long song, and it's a little compared to some of the other tracks. It's actually a little bit slower, which kind of took me off guard. But I like it though. I think it's one of the most well-rounded tracks on the album. What is
Yeah,
your favorite part about it? What puts it what elevates it above the other tracks for you?
I just think the riff is killer. Like the opening guitar riff is fantastic. I love like every part of the song for the most part. Yeah, it's maybe there's. I think Lindsay and I, when it came out, we really liked it, but we agree there was probably like a section they didn't have to repeat that would have made it shorter. There's like a bridge in there that isn't, I guess, I feel like super necessary, but like the choruses and the verses, I don't know, like the guitar tone's fantastic. The bass playing on that song is maybe the best on the whole album. Um,
And
it
I
has like
do I think the falsetto works really good on that track. Like that's a classic
yeah,
Queen's tracks to
the
me.
melodies are so good. The drumming is on point. Like it's rocking, but like you said, it's a little slower, so it's not like in your face like Head Like a Haunted House or Domesticated Animals. It's very easy to like get hooked on it. And it's not like as complex as like Unreborn Again. And it even has a little fun part at the end where they just go into like a straight 4/4 like well I don't know the rest of the song might be in 4/4 but they change the tempo and they're just doing like almost like a feel good hit of the summer kind of just fast little riff to end the
I
song.
I kind of wish there was another track like that, kind of on the first half of the record. Kind of just a more of another classic, Queens of the Stone Age track. And not because I don't think a band should just repeat themselves all the time. I think bands should grow and do different things and branch out. But I don't know. They're a band that they have a certain sound that only they can do. So it's cool when you get those tracks that really capture what I would say is the essence of the band.
Yeah, I agree. That because the evil has landed to me is like a classic Queens of the Stone Age song like and but it's very different than like Clockwork, which is my favorite album. There's just so like that song cannot be on that album. Probably. I mean, that album does have Smooth Sailing, which I think Smooth Sailing was like the precursor to this album. Like this
I
album
was gonna
has all the
say,
smooth sailing type of songs.
but unfortunately, Smooth Sailing is my least favorite off of that album.
Well, yeah, it's not. It's probably like my second least favorite off the album, but you needed one song on Like Clockwork that wasn't so depressing and like slow, and you needed a song that because like every Queens of the Stone Age album will even like their darker albums will have a kind of fun song, a quirky song.
Right, right.
And then this album is kind of like all quirk, which is why this album to me has like the two like kind of ballads and serious songs, which is Fortress, which we already talked about loving, and then the last song, which is like almost the title track, Villains of Circumstance, which another song I love. Like it's like maybe one of their most like ballads they've ever done. But I love it. The chorus in that song is fantastic. Like that's like one of my favorite parts of the whole album. The chorus, the close your eyes and dream me home part. I love that part.
Yeah, I do think this song, I think what makes it really strong on the album, it's definitely probably the most dynamic, which I think that's the thing with this album is I think even if the songs have a lot of parts, they're not the most dynamic to me. For example, Songs for the Deaf, there's a lot of moments that like they start and they stop, they drop in together, they're synchronized bits, and like I think those parts make the song kind of dynamic in a way, and they keep you on your toes and they're interesting. Where I found this album was a really good kind of like background album when I was at work because it's energetic and fun. But so when you get to, especially after The Evil Has Landed, you get to a song like this, you're like, oh, it's more engaging again. It's like, oh, well, where's the song gonna go? Da da da. And I I think it's probably like my fourth favorite on the album. I think I still do like like Feet Don't Fail Me Now a little more, just because it's like a little more hype, and The Evil Has Landed, and Fortress is still my favorite. But that being said, like Villains of Circumstance and all of the ones I just mentioned, I think are great songs, and I did sleep on them first listen. I do remember liking though Fortress from the beginning.
Which is so surprising to me. Like, that's not the song. Like, I actually thought that would have been one of your more least favorites.
No, I like it, and I think his vocals sound really interesting on there because he's starting to sound a little older, but it's like he sounds the right amount of worn down on it. I don't know how to describe that better, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, no, yeah. That's a song that you cannot write until you have life experiences. And again, the song's about his kid, so it's a song where like you have to, yeah, it's
he's being vulnerable in it, which I like. It feels
yeah,
genuine.
and that's why I like the title track, that last song on the album too, because it's to me that kind of same thing. Now, so okay, so we both kind of came to the same agreement with these albums. Like, they're probably still our least favorite. For me, Self-Titled is probably my least favorite. For you, Villains is probably your least favorite. But we both agree that we like them way more than we initially did. And we at least think that they're albums we can put on maybe in the background and enjoy them, even if we don't dive deeper into the songs themselves. Now, this brings us to the very last bit of this episode where, earlier in May, they released their song Emotion Sickness off their album coming out next month called In Times New Roman. ... Which really quick, the whole thing. He even confirmed this in an interview that I read this morning, where it is kind of a trilogy of albums. You have their album, you have Like Clockwork, which is ... Like Clockwork. Then you have Villains, and then you have In Times New Roman ... So it's like the dots at the beginning and end of those two albums kind of is like the beginning and end of this trilogy of albums. You also have the same artist doing the artwork for all three, so again, it makes sense. And then with the Motion Sickness, we're not going to get into it on the podcast, but like the song is very personal. Like, Josh Homme, the lead singer, he's been through a lot over the last 5+ years, between people in his life, passing away, obviously COVID, divorce, all that stuff, which we don't find relevant to necessarily talk about, but it is relevant to the music in a sense. And I think this album is going to be a pretty dark album, not as dark as Like Clockwork, because that album was so dark because it was about a near death experience for him. But this album, I think, is going to be very personal and very raw.
But okay, here's what I don't get, and we can talk more about the actual, song. I don't want to talk too much about the trilogy bit, but I don't really see how Villains relates to Like Clockwork in any way. To me, Villains sounds just kind of like an album. Like, once again, I'm not saying that it's not a meaningful album, but where Like Clockwork has themes to it, like you said, it was inspired by his near-death experience. Villains just sounds like, hey, here's my latest album.
Well,
and it sounds like what you're saying with, In Times New Roman, that it really could be connected in a way to Like Clockwork or have some, parallels. But Villains, and besides, how does that make sense? Like Clockwork, Villains, and Times New Roman? What does that mean? What does it mean?
Yeah, that I don't know. Maybe that's something we're going to have to listen to the new album to find out. Or maybe it's something, I mean, my thinking of it is it's a loose concept idea. It's not like freaking My Chemical Romance, the Black Parade, where like every song is like ties into one another. I don't think it's like that. Like, I think it's gonna be I think Like Clockwork is a near death album. I think Villains could be an album where it's about him coming to terms with him getting older. Like, Feet Don't Fail Me Now is him reminiscing about like being 17 again, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Way It Used to is also him reminiscing about days of past. And then you have those ballad songs like Fortress and Villains of Circumstance, where he's like, okay, I'm as a father, as a husband, like these are things I want to write about in songs.
The whole Ginger Elvis persona.
Yeah,
Elvis is pretty old.
And then maybe like Unreborn Again and Hideaway are songs like, him trying to find ways to like kind of cope with his past experiences and trying to move forward.
Oh yeah, and is it The Evil Has Landed where he says near life experience?
Yeah, yeah.
I did notice that.
So I do think there could like what like the titles of each album has to do with one another. I don't know. Besides the etc. The dot dot dot, but I do think, and we won't know this until we hear all the songs on the new album, but I do think there could be a connection. Um, and I imagine there to be a lot of like dark, serious songs on the new album. That said, Emotion Sickness, not other than the lyrics, it's not super dark. Musically, it's I think still a little bit like Villains, kind of in the sound and production.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a fun song. It's a song that took me a little bit to grow on though, because not because I was unimpressed with it, but because like the verses are very kind of like stop go. To me, that type of songwriting for them is more like an era vulgaris kind of sound. But then like the chorus is like super catchy and almost reminiscent of like older like 60s, 70s bands, to where like I found both parts, the verse and the chorus, to be almost like they didn't connect at first.
I do think those two different flavors actually are really nice though, and I'm glad to hear that because and I'm not trying to shit on Villains because I did like Villains a lot more this time around. But I think once again that I think Villains was very one-toned throughout it. So I think that is nice to hear. Oh, we have this like hook that's, different for the band, kind of new. But then you still do have I'll say this. When the song first started, and I saw someone posted this, saying that Emotion Sickness kind of feels like leftovers from Villains. But I think this is a strong song. It's kind of longer, I think, and I think the biggest thing I did not like was the production. I remember that. Was it like a leaked version, like a day early before the release? You sent me it. And
Yeah,
I just assumed that I was like, oh, this must just be a poor quality like ripping or something like that. And then I listened to the release song and it sounded the same. I was kind of shocked that he put out something with that production. It just felt lacking, but maybe I'm being too critical. I don't know that much about production, so.
yeah. I saw it was released on Apple Music through their I forget what it's called, the audio where it like pans when you move your head.
Oh, spatial.
Yeah, spatial audio. Yeah. And I have AirPods, so I can actually, and I do have Apple Music. I'm on a free trial right now that's about to expire. So I will go listen to it through that, and I'll let you know if it sounds better, because maybe the quality there is better.
Okay, yeah, report back.
But yeah, I it seems like you and I both enjoy the new single, and I do think if that is going to be representative of the album, I do think it could kind of have a mix of Villains, more kind of catchy sound, with some kind of more weird old school Queens vibes. Because a lot of people online were like, yeah, it sounds like Era, sounds like Lullabies. So
I do not hear lullabies in that song.
I don't either.
Well, maybe besides, the chorus.
Yeah, because it's catchy.
If I had to pick something.
But I'm very curious to see how the rest of the album's going to sound like. Breaking news, you heard it here first. Although by the time you're listening to this, the album will actually probably be almost released. But we're recording this right now. Today's date we're recording this is May 21st. But I just read on Reddit right now that someone who leaked the information about the release date of Emotion Sickness just posted on Reddit and said new single May 31st is going to be the song Carnivoyeur. It's like carnivus and like voyeur combined into one word. It's one of the songs off the new album, and it's supposedly the next single that's going to drop on May 31st.
It's kind of a dumb title for it, but I'm excited for the track.
Yes. We will probably, I do think we'll probably, maybe not in June, because we have a lot of things we're recording in June, but we will, I think, eventually do an episode where we review some upcoming albums, and I do think we'll definitely talk about the new Queens of the Stone Age album.
Yeah, a lot of releases we're looking forward to this year, so this is definitely one of them, and probably the biggest one I'm looking forward to, I would say.
Yeah, I have a lot. It's hard for me to even pick one at this point. Unfolds. I'm really looking forward to, even though there's only 10 songs and he's already released 3 of them. Um, Jason Isbell, every song he's released from this new upcoming album, I've enjoyed even more. So I'm looking forward to that. Um, and then the Foo Fighters too. I was not expecting to like their new music as much as I have been. So we'll probably eventually do an episode where we talk about some newer releases. But yeah, I think that covers this episode though. Glad we did it, and I definitely think in the future we will do some more revisiting episodes where we revisit an album from a band we like that we did not enjoy the album, but giving it a listen with a new set of ears might change our opinion on them. Yeah. So until then, we hope everyone takes care, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. So till then, talk to you later. Bye bye.